Welcome to our 7th episode of Child Sexual Abuse Prevention by Zena podcast. I'm your host, Zena Poncel. Hi, guys. Thank you for popping on again. In this episode, I'm going to provide you with information on child advocacy centers, specifically what they are and the history of child advocacy centers, which are commonly called CACs. If you hear me say CACs, please know I am referring to child advocacy centers. You may have heard of child advocacy centers maybe through a health fair or some kind of community event, or maybe your child was referred to a CAC for a forensic medical exam or a forensic interview, or maybe specialized counseling for child sexual abuse victims, or maybe all three, due to allegations of child sexual abuse. Maybe you have never heard of a child advocacy center. This podcast will open the doors to what a child advocacy center's purpose is and what it does to help child victims of sexual abuse and their families. A child advocacy center is a safe, child-friendly place where children of all ages and their non-offending caregiver or caregivers, maybe more than one, are sent to or taken to by law enforcement or Department of Family and Children's Services for evidence collection, mostly for allegations of child sexual abuse. However, children of different forms of maltreatment may be taken there as well. But CACs are primarily for children who are alleged victims of sexual abuse and their supportive family members. Can anyone just call up a CAC and say, hey, I need to bring my child in for a forensic interview or a forensic medical exam because I think someone may have messed with them? No, that is not how CACs work. A child has to be referred to a CAC by law enforcement or DFACS to have a forensic interview and or a forensic medical exam done. Basically, if you suspect child sexual abuse, report your suspicions to your local law enforcement agency or Department of Family and Children's Services. They will schedule an appointment at the CAC in your area for whatever services are needed to assist them in the child sexual abuse investigation. Please remember, the CACs are designed and developed to make your child as comfortable as possible in a child-friendly environment through the process of evidence collection. The people who work at the CACs, mainly those who are working directly with your child, have had in-depth training on working with children through their different developmental ages and stages. Many CACs also offer follow-up counseling services. If they don't offer in-house counseling services, they can generally refer you to somewhere who does. They should be able to anyway. Okay, let's look into the history of CACs, how they came to be in the first place. As you already know, child sexual abuse has been ongoing for many, many, many years. Way back in the day, I'm talking before CACs came to be, a long, long time ago, during child abuse investigations, if law enforcement was working a case, or Department of Family and Children's Services are working a case, or a different investigative agency, they were very guarded and protective over who had their information, which generally included evidence and other vital details. Many agencies did not want to share information on their cases with other investigative agencies back then through the investigative process. Families and children were being interviewed several times by different departments or agencies because no one would share their information with the other professionals working these cases. This was of no fault of the different investigators. This was how they were trained. Think about it. Through their in-depth training, confidentiality was key and still is during investigations. My background is in social services, and yes, confidentiality was stressed during my education and on-the-job training as well. I'm still very guarded about what I share. My dad was law enforcement, so I was raised in a household where confidentiality on certain things was, and still is, very important. Ours was mainly for safety reasons. The following I'm going to read to you is directly from the National Children's Advocacy Center, also known as the NCAC. In my opinion, the key to the CAC's success is the multidisciplinary team, or the MDT approach. You'll hear me say MDT coming up, and that's what I'm talking about, the multidisciplinary team. Okay, and with the multidisciplinary team or the MDT team approach, that's where all the investigative and supportive agencies meet once a month and review each child case, and they share information amongst each other. Keep in mind, even though these MDT teams meet monthly, they are still working very closely together behind the scenes daily, sharing information in the best interest of the child. Okay. The following I'm fixing to read you is directly from the NCAC, their webpage. It has a history of it, so I pulled that, and I'm literally going to read it. And this was one of the small sections I'm fixing to read you about Robert E. Kramer, and then it goes more into the history of the NCAC. In 1985, former Congressman Robert E., also known as Bud, Kramer from Alabama, who was then a district attorney in Madison County, Alabama, saw the need to create a better system to help abused children. The social service and the criminal justice systems at the time were not working together in an effective manner that children could trust, adding to the children's emotional distress and creating a segmented, repetitious, and often frightening experience for the child victims. The National Children's Advocacy Center, again also known as the NCAC, located in Huntsville, Alabama, revolutionized the United States response to child sexual abuse. Since its creation in 1985, the NCAC has served as a model for the 1,100 plus child advocacy centers now operating in the United States and even more than 41 countries throughout the world. Now, personally, I'm uncertain as to which countries they are, but I'm very curious, so I'm sure I'll be looking into that to find out. I may mention this in a future podcast, okay? All right, I'm going back to my information from the NCAC. The CAC model of a multidisciplinary team, MDT, approach, developed through the vision of former Congressman Robert E. Bud Kramer and a group of key individuals, pulled together law enforcement, criminal justice, child protective services, and medical and mental health workers into one coordinated team, which again, the MDT team is what they're called now. Instead of enduring questioning with multiple professionals, the potential victim talks to a specialized interviewer, also known as a forensic interviewer, in a non-threatening, child-friendly environment. The information gained during that interview is shared with members of the MDT team. After developing its innovative CAC/MDT approach on the local level, the NCAC began to train others to deal effectively with these complex investigations. Through its influence and training, communities across the country and across the world began to model their child abuse programs after the CAC MDT approach created at the National Child Advocacy Center. Training for child abuse response professionals began in February 1985 with the Southwest Symposium on Child Sexual Abuse, with 367 attendees from states in the southeastern United States, and has grown into the International Symposium on Child Abuse. In addition to the symposium, the NCAC Training Center trains thousands of people each year from the United States and around the world on how to recognize and support maltreated children. More than 282,849 child abuse professionals from all 50 states and more than 170 countries have been trained by the NCAC since 1985. Through the work of its prevention department, intervention department, MDT, training department, and the Southern Regional Children's Advocacy Center program, the NCAC serves as a beacon of hope for more than 10,000 child abuse victims every year. Now, the stats that I just read you, and this is back to Zena talking, I'm not reading anything now, but the stats that I just read you might be just a few years old, but they shouldn't be that old. But you can go to the NCAC page. I will have the website posted on the description notes of this podcast. Just click on that, and you should be able to navigate through the website, and you'll run across this, the history part. You can click on the history component of it, and you'll run across what I just read you, which may be easier than listening to me on a podcast. with all these acronyms and everything tied into it. But anyway, I personally, Zena, have been to the Symposium on Child Abuse in Huntsville, Alabama, as well as I received my professional training as an extended child forensic interviewer there. So if you work in the field of child protection of any form, I highly recommend their trainings. And like it mentioned earlier in the article, of what is now called the International Symposium on Child Abuse. It is a wonderful place just to go visit, see the layout of the Child Advocacy Center there, and the trainings they have are phenomenal. So if that's the field you want to go into, I highly suggest you research it. And on the webpage, it has a list of trainings. And I'm sure, I haven't looked, but I'm sure they probably have some online trainings as well as in-person trainings. The extended forensic interview training that I did was in person. I actually went there and took the trainings. So anyway, I just wanted to toss that out there to you guys. That's something y'all can look into. If you want more information on different things, shoot me an email at csapreventionbyzena@gmail.com. I'll dig a little deeper. I do want to dig into which countries do have the actual CAC, maybe a Child Advocacy Center model, Child Advocacy Center and MDT model. I want to look into that, and then I can post that for you and maybe in a description somewhere, or talk about them at in future podcasts. There you have it. What a Child Advocacy Center is and how it came to be, and information straight from the National Child Advocacy Center. By the way, that website is www.nationalcac.org. The NCAC also has an online library you may be interested in. I highly encourage you to go to their website and navigate around. Maybe you're thinking, there isn't a CAC in my county. I've never heard of them. What do I do? Where would law enforcement or Child Protective Services send my baby for a forensic exam or interview if they needed one? Great questions. Not all child advocacy centers are named Child Advocacy Center. They may be called something completely different. I know several that don't have CAC in their names. Satilla Advocacy Services, that's a rape crisis and a child advocacy center combined. Another one is Sadie's House. That's a child advocacy center. The Rainbow House Children's Resource Center is another one, and the list goes on and on. I know for sure if you are in the United States, law enforcement and Family and Children Services know exactly where the child advocacy centers are located. The CAC may not be in your county, but you do have one that serves your area. The CAC I worked at for years covers 6 counties. If a child victim in any of those 6 counties needed services, law enforcement and or DFACS referred them to us, and they still do. Now, what if you're in a different country? Remember, there are numerous countries out there who have CACs as well, based on the information provided by the National Children's Advocacy Center. A report to local law enforcement or Child Protective Services in your country is a great starting point. Remember, the investigative agencies should know exactly where to send you and your child for the child-friendly investigation. And often, they will meet you there. If you, like many other parents or caregivers, decided to send your child to a psychologist, a counselor, or a mental health professional due to uncertainties in your child's behavior, and the therapist becomes suspicious of child sexual abuse based on your child's words or actions, they are mandated reporters and are required to contact law enforcement or Child Protective Services, which should get the investigative process started and will usually aim you towards a child advocacy center somewhere in your area. Thank you to all the safe parents and caregivers for looking out for your kids. Thank you to the non-parents out there who just want some information on the subject of child sexual abuse prevention because you have an interest in protecting children. While I don't have all the answers, I will try to answer your questions to the best of my ability, or refer you to someone who can. You can email me at csapreventionbyzena@gmail.com. Like I've said before, and will probably say again, please learn as much as you can about child sexual abuse prevention, whether you listen to this podcast or not, or several different podcasts about the subject, which I highly recommend. Please learn about it from somewhere. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am looking forward to talking to you next Thursday. Have a great rest of the week, and don't forget to take care of yourself as well as your kiddos.
Don't forget to be safe. I appreciate it.